My name is Gertrude Marie Ann Imperato Holly. I was born in Jersey City, October 4th, 1927. I was supposed to be named after my grandmother. However, her name was Angela Custodia. And there were too many Angelas in the family, so I wasn't getting that name. And Custodia, they didn't like to call me Custodia, so naturally, the first place they go is to the priest at their church. And it was what they call an Italian church because it was always had Italian priests. The Italian members around always went to that church. So they went to see Father Monteleone. And he went into a long session about the name, what name I should be given. So he told my mother and father that Custodia means guardian. After all, it's guardian angel, right? So Custodia is garden, and he said, well, a custodian is like a spear maiden, and the spear maiden is named Gertrude. So therefore, you should call her Gertrude. And that's how I got my German name from the Italian priest. Everyone called me Gertie, and some of them called me Dirty Gertie. My parents were born, both of them, in Italy. My mother was born in a small town near Genoa, northern Italy, and my father was born on the island of Ischia near southern Italy. The island of Ischia is right next to the Isle of Capri. Both of them came here when they were about 1 year old. My father came over first 1 year before my mother. They both came over by ship and had to be sponsored by someone already living in this country. My mother was sponsored by her father. He came here first, and then he arranged to have his wife and daughter come over. My mother's name, Clementina Lazzardo Imperato, and my father, Anthony Joseph Imperato. She was named after my grandmother's sister, who left Italy to marry a young man from Switzerland. So when she left for Switzerland, my grandmother, of course, she was sad at seeing her sister leave the country, so she named her new baby after her sister. When she was going steady, so to speak, with my father, he didn't care for the name Clementina, and he said, "You're not Clementina anymore. Now you're Caroline, but I'm going to call you Carrie. And so from here forth, you will be Carrie." So she said, okay. My father was a printer in a large printing shop in New York City, the name of which was Davidson Printing Company. I'll never forget it. And they had huge printing presses. I know that because one day when I was young, he took the family, my brother and I and my mother, over to his place of business and showed us the machines that he worked on. Mother stayed home and took care of everything. When I went to work after I graduated from high school, my father told me that he expected me to give a certain amount of money from my pay to my mother every week. It needn't be a large amount, a small amount that I would be able to handle and be able to take care of other little items for myself. 'Cause 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 'c The background of the family is Roman Catholic. My father did not go to church. He did not participate, but he made sure that we always went. My mother, my brother, and I went every Sunday, enjoyed church, and it was only an hour, so we walked to church because it was only 2 blocks away. And certain Sundays when we came home, my father would have a Manhattan ready for my mother and myself, which we enjoyed. I had contact with my grandmother, my mother's mother. My grandmother was a lovely person. She liked to talk. She spoke Italian. She spoke Italian to me, and I answered her in English. And we got along very well. And she was very kind and generous. We had a lot of fun with her. She was a frequent visitor. She lived in the Morristown area of New Jersey and would come to visit twice a month or so, and we would go to visit her twice a month. So it was a close relationship. My grandfather, her husband, he died when he was about 50 years old. And then when she remarried, she took on another name, naturally. After her second husband died, she came to live with us and was a good part of the family. And even after I was married, she came to visit me for a couple of weeks at a time. She would stay here and have a lot of fun with my husband. The two of them would sit at the table and talk to each other, one in Italian and one in English. Even though my husband Neil wasn't Italian and didn't know anything about it, he could understand her. She made herself understood. She used a little broken English once in a while. So we were very happy with my grandmother. That is the only grandparent that I really knew while I was young. The only thing I know about my grandmother's mother-in-law is she was a midwife and delivered babies. I thought that was funny because it was a long time ago. And then I reasoned that, well, that was probably natural at the time because there weren't that many doctors around. There were only 2 children in my family, my brother and myself. And my brother is about 1.5 years older than I am. Leo was a lot of fun. We grew up together, very close in age, and had mostly the same friends. So that was a plus. But Leo at home, he was very likable, and he liked his desserts. He also liked my dessert and would say to me from time to time, "You really don't want that, Gertie, do you?" And naturally, I handed it over to him. The house I grew up in was what was known as a tenement house. It was in Jersey City. There were 6 families, 3 on each side, and 3 floors. And first you went up outside you went up about 10 concrete steps. There was a landing, and then you went up about another 8 wooden steps to a wooden landing, and then into the home. My room was a very bare bedroom. In it, I had my bed and night table and 1 bureau. It was not a large room. When I was very young, maybe 4 years old, 3, 4, We had 2 twin beds in the room, and my brother slept in the other bed until they made other arrangements for his quarters. My home life was very good. I had a happy childhood, and we were all happy at home. My mother did all of the housework, the cooking, everything that women were supposed to do back in those days. Women at that time did not work out of the home. My father always had a job. He was a foreman in his trade, and worked very hard, but was never without work. And I do remember we were very happy when he bought his first car. I believe it was early 30s, and we were the only one on the block that had their own car. So he felt good about that. We never actually did without, but there was a time, I remember one Christmas, my father said to us, this Christmas is not going to be as abundant with gifts as other years, because he said, I have 2 nieces. Their family is not in good shape. The father has been out of work for a long time, and we want to try to help them a little more than usual. And we were fine with that, because we did get our share of Christmas goodies, but not maybe what we would have gotten other years. My parents were very kind parents. They didn't actually make us do much of anything. Just little things here and there. Although I will say that we didn't have dishwashers. I washed the dishes every night. And of course, if I had to go someplace, my mother would say, fine, go. She would take care of everything. I didn't have to do it, but I wanted to do something. I don't remember too much about when I learned to cook, but it must have been when I was about in my late teens. My mother taught me how to cook, and the first thing she taught me how to make was naturally spaghetti and meatballs. I loved her meatballs. We always did. I made them exactly the same way, and I do to this day. During the summer especially, the family would always go to the beach. When I say beach, we lived in Jersey City, so that meant a little trip. My father would take us to a beach by the Atlantic Highlands. We would go there practically every week during the summer. And the trip home was usually brutal, because we didn't have the parkway, and the ride over what they called the Victory Bridge was very, very long. And the cars were stop and go all the time. But we had a lot of fun. Christmas was a very happy day. Usually, when we came home from church, we would open our presents and have a lot of fun. We enjoyed it, and my mother always made a wonderful dinner, an early afternoon, maybe 2, 3 o'clock, and we would then either play with our toys, so to speak, watch TV, or even play cards. I grew up in Jersey City, and we always had a good time. My brother had a lot of friends, and I had a lot of girlfriends, and we all knew each other. We would get together practically every evening, summertime mostly, and gather and talk, or play games, or go in the street and play Red Rover, who's next to come over. When I was young, I guess it was about when I was 10 years old, maybe 9 years old, I liked dolls, and the favorite doll was the famous Didi doll. it was a wetting doll, and you had diapers for the doll, and you would ask your parents to get your doll clothes, and eventually you would have a beautiful carriage for the doll. My girlfriend and I, we both had dolls and both had carriages, and every week, mostly on Saturday, we would take the dolls for a walk up on the avenue and spend a good time with it. We enjoyed it. When I first saw New York City for the first time was when my mother took me there to buy a doll for me for Christmas. So we went to the big city, and I was very impressed because the buildings were so tall. All we did was just look up before we went to Macy's to buy my doll. And then before we came home, we would stop and eat at Horn and Hardart, which was a luncheon type of restaurant where you put your money into a slot, which was part of a cubicle that held a small sandwich or a piece of pie, and that's where we ate our lunch. We would put our money in, take our food out of its little chamber, go to our table, and enjoy our dinner. Grammar school, for me, was good. It sounds like everything was good in my life, but believe me, it was. I had a very good childhood. The school I went to was a Catholic school, Sacred Heart School, and it was only 2 blocks away from my home. So I would walk there every day and go through the regular ritual, stand out in the yard until the principal rang the bell, and then we would all file into school. The nuns taught the school from the 1st grade to the 8th grade. There was no kindergarten. During school, if someone was bad, first of all, I have to tell you, the classrooms were very big. It was mostly very crowded. Sometimes there were 80 children to a class, and the nuns, believe me, had a lot to deal with. So you can't blame them really for being a little on the harsh side. If anyone caused a disturbance, they could have been slapped, sometimes on the back. And I remember one time a nun took her fingers and pinched a little boy's cheek, and she said to him at the same time, "The cheek of you," for doing something that he wasn't supposed to do. That is one thing that always stuck in my memory. When I became a teenager, the relationship with my family became closer. We became more like friends. My mother and I would shop together, see which clothes looked good on each other before we bought anything. And my father was also very good to me when I was in my teen years. He taught me how to drive, and he also would do anything I asked him to do. This one time I remember I was making a skirt on a sewing machine, and the material was a red plaid, and I had to line up the pieces so that the plaid pattern would match. So my mother wasn't too good at that, but I said, "Papa, could you help me with my skirt that I'm making?" So he came over to the table where I had the goods out, and he said, "Sure." And the two of us had had a lot of fun matching up the plaid for my skirt. He would do things like that. As a matter of fact, he would do anything that I asked him. In high school, I really didn't belong to a clique. I was not a loner. I had friends, but I did not join a group. I would rather have a couple of good friends than going weekly with a certain group. I had many friends in high school. As a matter of fact, in my last year of high school, I was voted most likely to succeed, which to me was an honor. I belonged to the drama club, and one year, I guess it was the last year, I was class treasurer and gathered the monies. My girlfriends and I would talk on the phone a lot, and on Saturdays, we would go shopping on the avenue. When I say the avenue, that meant 1 block away there was a long avenue filled with stores that we would like to look at. These were all individual stores. There were candy stores, there were stores that sold things for the home, clothing stores. So we had a lot of stores to look at. There must have been about 5 blocks on the avenue filled with different stores, both sides of the street. So we would walk down one side, look at everything, and back on the other side. I took piano lessons, which was sort of a hobby, but it wasn't to my liking that much. I had to take classical lessons, and at the time, even though I liked it, it wasn't my cup of tea. So after a few years, I just quit playing the piano. Back when I was in my teens, roller skating was very popular. On Friday nights, we used to, usually just on Friday nights, we would go to the rink, and it would be quite crowded, and sometimes even more so because there was a naval depot nearby, and the sailors used to come and skate also on Friday night. It was a place to meet boys, girls, whoever you wanted to meet. And most of them, I would practically say all of them, were very, very nice. I think with most kids, the favorite game was Monopoly. We liked it, it was interesting, it lasted a long time, and we could spend a few hours having fun with it. When I was growing up, I never really had any idea that I would be a certain someone. It just didn't occur to me at the time, and I figured that after I finished high school, I had taken a commercial course in high school, I would leave and go into the business world, become a stenographer and then a secretary. So that was my goal, as with most girls at that time. We really didn't think about favorite subjects. We knew what we had to take, and we figured we better take it. I didn't care for science too much. I was geared more to the commercial subjects. I liked, naturally, I liked steno and typing, and I liked commercial law. It was definitely okay for girls to be smart in school. And to tell you the truth, there were quite a few of them. I had one favorite English teacher. I enjoyed literature, grammar, any part of the English subject, and she was very smart, let me put it that way. There were some teachers that were not as good as she, and she would sort of challenge you when you wrote something, when you wrote a paragraph or a story, wrote a story. She would challenge your use of certain words, whether they were proper or not. During my teenage years, I did not work consistently. Like most girls, I babysat and derived a little money that way. And I remember one summer I worked for the Quartermaster Corps for the Army. I worked as a stenographer and typist, and it was for the whole summer. I had a good wage. I enjoyed it very much. And they wanted me to continue on working for them after graduation, but I would have to move to Texas, so I declined. I did not get my driver's license at a young age. I was over 20. I don't remember whether it was 21 or 22. I loved to drive. My father taught me how to drive, and mostly he taught me on Route 10 going from Jersey City to Morristown, because that's the road we would take going to see Grandma. It was a 3-lane highway, and at the time they called it the Death Highway, because the middle lane was for passing, and that meant passing for the party that was going either way. So sometimes when you tried to pass a car, there was another car coming at you, facing you, because they were passing someone on the other side of the road. So it was a little tricky at times. But my father, when he was teaching me on that road, he would yell and say, "Pass now, hurry!" And I would pass the car in a hurry, and that's how I learned to drive. I began dating in my late teens. My parents' rules about dating were very few. I had to be home at a certain time, and they always wanted to meet the boy that was taking me out and had to know where we were going. Activities on dating were mostly going to the movies, and of course in my area, roller skating. And I guess that was it. There wasn't too much to do. We didn't actually have any bars around that young people or even over 21 would visit. It wasn't the thing at the time to go to the bar as a couple. The men went to the bar, and it was always more of a type like a saloon. There's a difference between a bar and a saloon. We never had a birds and bees talk at home with my parents. I learned from the girls on the street. My friends, as far as dating, were very much like myself, not promiscuous at all, and always looked forward to the time when Prince Charming would come along, sweep us off our feet, and marry us. Mostly during high school years, I loved to read. I would read, particularly I liked detective stories, but I would read mostly anything, even classics. I was an avid reader. After I left high school, I took the summer off, had graduated in June, took the summer off, then went to look for a job in September. Our counselor from school came to my home to visit me and tell me that the school had arranged for a job for me with a lawyer in Jersey City. That was because I came away with the award for steno and typing. So I politely refused. And I told him that I didn't want to work in Journal Square. I was going to New York. And that's what I did. I went to New York to get a job. I went to, at the time we had employment agencies. So I went to an employment agency in New York, and they sent me to a place, a concern downtown. It was a private concern, H.W. Robinson and Company. I started working in New York City September 1945, right after World War II, and started as a secretary, worked my way up, became an office manager for one department, for an export department, and stayed there for 12 years. During World War II, which started 1941, we did have rationing. There was rationing for sugar, for butter, for other items that the government had to first send to the soldiers, and people at home had to do with whatever they could with the small amount that they received. I knew that my mother and father liked sugar in their coffee, so I gave them my rations for sugar because I didn't use it. But we weren't deprived that much. It was certain things here and there, but it really didn't affect the way of life. It did affect my father's way of life because he had gas rationing for the car. And maybe sometimes he couldn't go someplace that he wanted to because he didn't have enough gas. I met Neil on a blind date. My girlfriend and I were both set up with blind dates by my girlfriend's cousin, who lived in the Spring Lake area. And we both went out with these two fellows, and I chose first which one I wanted to go out with. And she was agreeable, so that's what we did. On that date, we went to wasn't really a nightclub. It was like a bar and a room for dancing. So we went to this tavern, so to speak, and danced all night, had a couple of beers, and had a lot of fun. On the first date, I was not the type to kiss goodnight. I was drawn to Neil because he was tall, had fair hair, and a nice smile. The other fellow was very good looking, but he was on the darker side, and I preferred fair-haired men. Well, I knew Neil was very interested in me because in order to go on a date, he had to travel from Spring Lake Heights to Jersey City, which was about 65 miles. He would come up once during the week and every weekend to take me out, so that showed me that he was quite interested in me. We went out to dinner one night to a restaurant in Bayonne, and when we were having dessert, that's when he proposed to me. I wasn't shocked because I knew it would be coming soon, but I didn't know exactly when, and it turned out to be a very nice evening. I don't remember that we talked about anything of the future before he proposed. We just were going what they call steady, and just went on that way. We didn't speak about it until after the engagement. Our wedding ceremony was in a Catholic church, It was on a Sunday afternoon, which no one does today, and not too many did at that time. We had our wedding on a Sunday afternoon because Neil's father owned a butcher shop, and it wasn't easy for him to close the shop and go to a wedding. So we accommodated him. Instead of having the wedding on Saturday, we had it on Sunday, late afternoon. It was in a nice restaurant in Jersey City. There were about 100 people at the wedding. It was a sit-down dinner and lots of dancing. And there was a band there for the music. So we really had a nice time. But this was, remember, back in 1956, I think it was, that I was married. And it was quite routine to have your wedding at a restaurant and have music and dancing. Once I got married, I never worked. I had worked for 12 years in New York when I lived in Jersey City. But when I moved to Spring Lake Heights, the trip was too far for me. My boss had wanted me to make the trip. He wanted me to continue working and would have paid for my train fare, but it was just much too far. The most difficult thing for me, starting the marriage and being in the marriage the first years, was Neil's job. He was a policeman in Spring Lake Heights and had the job time changed every week. 1 week it would be from 8 to 4, next week 4 to 12, and then 12 to 8. It was very hard to get used to that. I did not like it at all. The most satisfying part of being married and job-wise was that Neil was close by. If I did need anything during the day and had no one to turn to, I could call him, and since he drove around town all the time, he could stop for a few minutes at home. When Neil and I got married, we decided that we would like to have children right away. I didn't want to wait, mainly due to my age. I was 28 when I got married and wanted to start a family right away, which is what we did. And my first child, Kathy, was born when I was 29. So I had figured that was old enough to start a family and young enough to start right away. So that's what we did. I had Kathy in February of 1957. She was a beautiful baby. Everyone in the hospital came to see her, and I often wondered why. They all told me she was beautiful. I knew she was beautiful, but here nurses and even a couple of doctors came to see her and look at her, and I said, it can't be. I think she's beautiful, but what are they looking at? So one day I asked the nurse why all the other nurses would come to see Kathy, and she said to me, she is a beautiful baby because she is perfect in everything. Size of her head, the size of her body, how long her legs are. They said she was just a perfect baby. So I was very, very happy with that. Since I was 29 years old, I figured I better have another child. If I wanted one, I better have one right away. So not only did I have one right away, but I had 3 right away. I had 4 children in 6 years. which was pretty fast, and it kept me hopping. But I had a wonderful time with the children. I needed a little help with Kathy when she was an infant because Neil was working shift work all around the clock, and no matter what time he came in, she would disturb us because she either ate too much and threw up, or she ate too much and had to be changed. But there was never a time when he came home for dinner that she didn't upset the apple cart. It was fun when you looked back and looked at it, but not going through it. Terry was born in March, and she was the most difficult birth because she just came face first and had to be turned. It was a small matter, but at the time it seemed like the end of the world until she was born. Next was Chrissy. Chrissy, I hardly remember her birth because it was so fast that I didn't remember a thing. Neil dropped me off at the hospital. They wheeled me into the maternity room. And when he got home, there was a telephone message waiting for him to turn around and come back to the hospital and see his new daughter. That was very fast. Lorraine's birth was very good. Since Chrissy delivered so fast, the doctor figured that he should induce me so that they would know just when the next child would be born. So Lorraine arrived on a beautiful day in June and was a happy baby, and I was very happy to have her. I had no boys. Neil said maybe we could have one the next time, but I said, sorry, Charlie, I'm finished. You'll have to find your boys elsewhere. So he became the scoutmaster down at school and had boys every week. All my children growing up were quite happy. They used to play together, mainly because there were no other children in the area to play with. We were on a street where most of the people were retired or very young. So they played with each other, enjoyed each other, and I will say Kathy, the oldest, was always the leader. She was the one when they played school. She was the teacher, maybe because she was older, but they followed her like she was the champion. There wasn't too much time for different types of activities, and there weren't too many activities to follow. Mostly in the summertime, we lived at the beach. The girls loved to swim, and they enjoyed any kind of activity on the sand. We were there practically every day. Neil didn't get down too much because first of all, he was working different shifts, and if he wasn't working, he was sleeping or riding around town. Neil was a good swimmer, and when he did come, he enjoyed riding the waves, and when Kathy was a very young 2-year-old, she would ride the waves with him on his back. They had a lot of fun, and we had a lot of fun watching them. With Neil, life was a little complicated. In the beginning, everything was rosy, but then after about a year, I noticed a little, I don't know whether it was a little change or whether it was there all the time. Neil liked to drink. As we went on, it seemed to me that he would drink a little more, and to the point where I didn't like it. I couldn't do much about it. I didn't say too much about it, and just went along figuring that, well, he liked to stop after work and have a beer and chat with the boys, go along with it and see how it goes. But then it became too much, and it wasn't good for him, and it wasn't good for our marriage. I had 4 children, which kept me very busy all the time, and naturally it took time away, my time away from being with Neil. So maybe that was part, but it did become a problem in our marriage. I never said anything to anyone about it. Everyone knew that Neil drank a little. He enjoyed drinking, and it wasn't to the point where it actually harmed our marriage, but later on it became a point where it harmed him. His eating decreased and he drank more, and I think it really was an obstacle in his health, his good health, and it eventually led to his downfall in health. He died at an early age. He had cancer a couple of times. There was no cancer in his body when he died, but when he died, he was merely 105 pounds, and he was 5'11". He was 51. I haven't seen any effect on my children due to Neil's drinking. The girls all knew that he drank a lot. They could see it. But as far as I could see, they were not in love with drinking. Neil and I had a very good relationship. We enjoyed talking to each other, and he had a good sense of humor, and I do believe the girls felt the same way. Of course, they deplored his drinking, but it wasn't treated as it would be today, a disease. If he had help, I'm sure that things would have turned out much better. Looking back on my life, there is only one thing that I wish I could have done. I wish I could have helped Neil more in his struggles to be a better person. The values that I tried to raise my children with were always remember that the biggest thing in your life is your family, and that you treat each other with respect and love, and enjoy each other. I did not use much form of discipline. If the children did something wrong, I would say to them, "You're grounded. You're grounded for a week." And then the week turned out to be 2 days maybe. And so they were very good children, and I didn't have the need to censure them very often. Greatest satisfaction in life is my family. There is nothing like it, and I'm really honored to be the mother of the children that I have, and I will always remember how good they were to me growing up and today, and I'm sure in time to come. The world has changed very much from the time I was very young to today's standards. When I was very young, the world to me was, in my own words, tight, very tight, narrow. We didn't know anything. We didn't look to know that much. Very few people were outgoing enough to want to do this or do that. We all just went along in a certain pattern. We believed that this is what we were supposed to do, and that's what we did. Today's world is entirely different. It's open to a point where anyone can say, when I grow up, I want to do this, and I'm going to do it. In yesteryear, you didn't have that thought in mind. You couldn't think it because there were so many obstacles you believed were in front of you that you couldn't get past it. Today, it doesn't seem to make any difference to anyone, and it must be because as the years have gone on, we've been told that if we want to do something, we can do it no matter what. And I love today's world for that very reason. I was born in 1927, and growing up, I did not have the opportunities or the outlook that the children have today. I think today's world is a wonderful place to be in, and that the future will even be more so because people are learning. They're learning about things they never thought about in my years. If I had to live in any decade of my choosing, I would choose today's decade because there is so much in this world to learn about. We have not even put our toe into it yet, never mind being immersed in it wholly. Inasmuch as I've grown up Catholic, I am still a Catholic, and but I have certain ideas about certain things. It doesn't matter to me who you are. It doesn't matter to me if you're man or woman or homosexual. I think it's all in what you are, what kind of person you are. Are you a decent person? Are you kind? Do you love people as a whole? And are you tolerant of their faults or their differences? And I would say I am tolerant of most anyone. I may not like certain things, but I still believe that it's a person's right to be what they want to be. One song that I like very much, and it always stays with me, and it's the September song. For it's a long, long time from May to December, but the years roll by when we get to September. The strongest advice I'd give today is to find out everything you can about the fellow, or vice versa, the girl that you are marrying. Sometimes things come up that are shocking to you during marriage if you didn't have any inkling about it. So I would say find out all you can, what their likes and dislikes are, where they went to school, what kind of an education did they have, what were their parents like, a regular quiz. I'm just the type of person, I've gone through life in, well, maybe a mediocre style, let's say. Nothing very great has happened. Of course, to me, my family is the greatest. I am an individual who has certain beliefs and ideas, and I am entitled to have certain beliefs and ideas as they are. Therefore, I would like them to remember to be a good individual. You should be kind. Try to be happy as you can. Be tolerant. Be loving. And have a good outlook on life. Look for the good things to happen. Don't look for doomsday. Enjoy your life. Look at the good things, not the bad. Be happy. Try your hardest to be happy. That's all you can do.